Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
President Obama's State of the Union echoes across the country with a message for Silicon Valley.
We're the nation that put cars in driveways and computers in offices. The nation of Edison and the Wright brothers, of Google and Facebook. In America, innovation doesn't just change our lives, it is how we make our living.
Polls show strong voter approval of Governor Jerry Brown as he prepares to deliver his State of the State address on Monday, even as he faces opposition to his plan to eliminate redevelopment funding. With education facing deeper cuts, what new forces may help shape the future? And the U.S. Supreme Court rules that federal judges cannot overturn state parole board decisions. That's coming up next. Good evening. I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me on our news panel are Scott Schaefer, host of the California Report on KQED Public Radio, Louis Friedberg, senior reporter with California Watch, and Lisa Vorderbruden, reporter and columnist for the Contra Costa Times, and Carla Marinucci, political reporter with the San Francisco Chronicle. So, Carla, we'll start with you. What parallels do you see between the problems of Washington and California?
Huge parallels. I mean, we saw President Barack Obama this week in the State of the Union, whether it's him in Washington or Jerry Brown here in Sacramento. Look, we've got high unemployment both dealing with, lots of red ink, lots of pressure from Republicans to make big cuts, and lots of pressure from their own loyal opposition that they have to keep on board. And this is the balancing act that both of these two guys are facing. I mean, you're looking at Barack Obama. You heard him mention Google and Facebook, saying innovation, education. Those are the themes. Those are the watchwords. And Jerry Brown saying some of the same things. He's trying to make the case. We're going to hear him in the State of the State, and Elisa, you're going to be talking about that. I mean, this is the problem that both of them have. I mean, it's about budget cuts, it's about concerns, and it's about balancing these deficits and this competitiveness agenda that both of them are talking about.
One big difference is that Jerry Brown may not run for re-election. He may be a one-term governor. Barack Obama is certainly going to run for re-election.
Absolutely, Scott. This is a major issue with the state of I mean, it's seen as the kickoff of the 2012 presidential election. And so a huge vision speech, a more than an hour-long vision speech about things like high-speed rail. And that it is a huge issue to California, and it is a huge issue to the Republicans who want to slash it.
Well, Jerry Brown certainly can say that I was a vision guy before this guy's a vision guy.
That's right.
When Jerry Brown was elected many years ago, that was his whole platform was a vision for the future.
You know, and we're actually seeing that. Although you don't expect to hear some hour-long State of the State address from Jerry Brown, it's an inaugural speech, short and to the point, and in a lot of ways, a lot of tough medicine, as Barack Obama dealt out also. But both of them, I think, try to give that sense of optimism. And it's funny, this is where the Reagan optimism comes in. They both learned that lesson. That is, that the idea that America, California can be great if we invest in the future, but there's all this red ink to deal with, and that is the problem that both of them have.
But, Carla, obviously, when you're talking about the State of the Union, you're talking about the state of the states. And all these states, including California, are just in terrible shape. And I didn't hear that much coming from the president about the challenges really facing the state, or any sense of any kind of bailout or help being on the way. Yeah, did I miss something?
Well,
or
I have to say, Obama did mention a couple of things very near and dear to California's heart, and when we mentioned high-speed rail, and that is an issue that has been a lightning rod in Washington. His goal is in the next 25 years to make high-speed rail accessible to 80% of Americans. And of course, California has been a huge recipient of billions of dollars of funds. There's $11 billion project now underway, but there's a lot of controversy about this project, and the Republicans would just like to see that one get drop-kicked.
To your point, Louis, some of these Republican governors are actually rejecting the money. I think California got some additional money.
That's right.
In
Minnesota,
fact,
I think, turned down some.
They turned it down because they
right.
think it's a waste of money, or it's a boondoggle, or it's going to require them to spend money nationally. You know, just one difference, big difference, another big difference between the two of these guys, though, is Obama doesn't have to balance the budget. Jerry Brown does, and it gives him a lot fewer options.
Yeah, absolutely right. And when you're talking about it's sort of an innovation agenda in California, here you've got Jerry Brown, and he's talking about ending or shutting down 400 redevelopment agencies. I know you talked about this, but this is one of the things some of these mayors are saying, look, this is where our innovation and our growth is coming from. There's also the whole issue of taxes. As we know, Brown's saying, look, we're going to have to extend a lot of these taxes. The Republicans, both in Congress and up in Sacramento, are just dead set against it. So this is a battle royale that we're facing here. In California, I think we're seeing a reflection of a lot of the national themes on a very big stage, the nation's most populous state. So.
But the fact that Jerry Brown doesn't have a lot of Republicans peering over his shoulder, except he does need the 2/3 in the legislature. But Barack Obama, had John Boehner sitting behind him. That's a totally different dynamic.
You're right, Liz. Yeah. That is a change. And I think, Jerry Brown has got, of course, both houses of the legislature behind him, but he's got to win over a couple of these Republicans, and many of them have signed no tax pledges. This is going to be, he is taking the case right to them. And I think when we talk about watching Obama with this very big and often eloquent speech about how we in America do big things, that is sort of the same thing that you hear Jerry Brown talk about, but in a much more sort of granular way. That is, look, California can be great, but we got to get this budget together first. That's his number one deal, and I think that's what you're going to hear him say. That's going to be his message when he comes to the State of the State.
Well, Lisa, we'll then start with you, because one thing Jerry Brown has going for him are good poll numbers. Some good news from the pollsters this week.
Well, it depends kind of how you read the poll. 2/3 of the PPIC poll, the respondents, said they liked the idea of having a special election for these, a 5-year temporary, the temporary tax syndrome. Yet, the support for the actual tax increases was less. And so you get the sense that people want to have a say, but whether they'll say yes remains to be seen. And it's still a long time from any election. We're still a long way from having any idea what would actually be on the ballot, what would be contained in the ballot. Will there be Republican votes for something to go on the ballot? Right now, they're all saying no. And, it could be very challenging for the governor to use these numbers. Now, granted, it makes for good, headlines to be able to say all these people support the idea of an election. An election for what? What are we going to vote on? And once we get down to those details.
One of the things about a special election is that the turnout tends to be a little smaller, and it tends to be a little more conservative. What is he doing already to entice those voters, and not only the Republican votes he needs in the legislature, but looking down the road a bit to June in the special election, what's he doing to kind of build trust and support among those folks?
Well, my sense is that he's trying to be very direct. I mean, a parallel with Obama is both of them have a very strong pragmatic streak. And the members of the legislature out in the East Bay say that, Jerry Brown he's accessible, he's there, he comes to their offices, they know him, they can talk to him. And in that sense, I think Jerry Brown is building stronger relationships, or building on relationships he already had with these legislators in order to win them over to get their votes.
And I'm wondering if some of these symbolic things he's doing are winning support.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, cutting the cell phones. Today it was the cars. These are
He has a
drop in the
picnic
bucket
table in
things.
his office,
That's
you know,
right,
yeah,
the
so-
picnic table in his office instead
Right.
of the big.
He doesn't want
Why?
people to stay long. You know,
And they're hard benches. He
They're
wants
hard
them to sit
benches,
down.
and he's delivering
Yeah.
hard news and hard information. And my sense from the legislators that I've talked to is it's just a refreshing shift from the Schwarzenegger administration, which had a very different feel and style to
Right,
it.
and I talked to the mayor of Orinda this week, who said he invited her in for a cup of Nescafe, which is like
Absolutely.
right out of the 50s.
Yeah.
But I mean, they actually talked to
And
them
a labor
about
leader,
what
yeah, a
they
labor
think.
leader out of East Bay
Kumbaya
yeah,
down
I know,
for a
it
moment.
is, yeah.
There were a group of people up there that weren't feeling so
This
friendly.
is true,
And
yeah.
those were big city mayors who
The
came up
mayors
to complain about
yeah.
redevelopment
The
cuts.
mayors are fit to be tied over his proposal to eliminate some 400 redevelopment agencies across the state. You know, divert $1.7 billion into the general fund, eliminate all of these programs that these cities love. Almost every city in California has a redevelopment agency, and they have been able to put forward a lot of their favorite projects using this money. But this is money that comes away from schools, fire districts, other local agencies that would go to those areas if that money were.
Well, let me ask you, because this is a key. I mean, based on past history, Democrats tend not to really get along that well with other Democrats when they're in the governor's office and the legislature. Jerry Brown has said he wants this budget passed. Was it by March?
By March.
And to what extent are Democrats going to come on board? Or to what extent is there going to be a huge battle around the details of the budget proposal? Because it's brutal. I mean, the cuts are brutal.
It's absolutely brutal, and I think it may come down to whether or not Jerry Brown can deliver some Republican votes. Because if he has the votes from the Republicans to actually pass something, the Democrats will have a lot of heat on them to come around to some
Is
agreement.
he going to have to do something like pension reform?
Well,
at
that's
least
the, you know,
throw
that's
that
the
one
talk,
out there.
You know, that they're going to have to tie pension reform to this, and you know, the Democrats are not excited about that. They think it'd be too complicated. It'd be too hard for the voters to understand. There's some kind of trade-off. Of course, the labor unions are not having it, and they have a very powerful
Well,
voice.
he's got to
in this.
put that off until after the special election. But, you know, to your point, Lewis, it's, you know, the only thing worse than what he's got on the table is what happens if this special election doesn't happen, if they don't pass a budget, and then they're going to have to find $12 billion more in cuts because there won't be the revenue that he's hoping for if these ballot measures, whatever they turn out to be, are passed in June. So.
And unlike Barack Obama, this is, as to steal a line from another Brown, Willie Brown, who made yesterday, this is the last rung on Jerry Brown's political ladder. At his age, he is unlikely to run for higher office. He has bet all of his chips on this
And that's
move.
helping him as
And
I
that
think
is
he's
helping
making
him.
this case.
That's right, because he has nothing, you know, he has everything to gain and no political agenda out into the future for trying to angle for new.
At least we think.
Or at least we think. We don't know. You know, Jerry Brown can be unpredictable. As we know.
Let's go back to the basics, though. What does he have to do by what timetable to
Well,
get moving here?
He needs to get the legislature to pass a budget by March and to put get the language of a ballot measure approved so that it can go on the June ballot. And I don't know the exact date in March. Perhaps you know, Scott, being in Sacramento. I'm not I'm not certain of the precise date, but it's a very tight time frame. The budget committee directors are all holding, you know, rapid fire hearings in which they're, you know, all these support groups are coming forward and saying people will die if you do this, and you know.
The good news is they now, because of the election in November last year, they only need a majority vote. They can get a budget passed with just the Democrats, basically. So I guess that'll help them at least get the budget passed. But then they still need to get these other things on the ballot.
Bipartisan support.
Well, and having a budget without the means to pay for it, which requires the 2/3 vote, seems sort of an empty gain, in my opinion. But we'll, you know.
Which moves us around to one of the biggest spots up there to fill, and that is money for education. So the governor has been pretty hard on higher education. So tell us where that battle is.
This is, and it relates directly to what we are talking about, and the special election really will have a tremendous impact on what happens next in terms of education. But yes, Jerry Brown has cut $1.4 billion from higher education, $500 million from the University of California, $500 from CSU, $400 million from the community colleges. He's calling for fee increases for community colleges, which actually most people support because the community colleges are still the best deal in going, maybe in the whole world from an education point of view. K-12 schools, he's kind of held steady, although there are some cuts and he's deferring payments. But you have to remember that the holding steady is at last year's level, which was already a very low level, and schools have had to lay off staff, increase class size, shorten the school year. So it's not as if schools are in great shape. But the key is, of course, what happens in June with the special election, because all bets are off if that tax extension or increase, depending on how you phrase it, doesn't pass.
What's the new news? What's the new news? What's come into this mix?
The thing that's complicated about it is at the same time that you have all these cutbacks going on, there's also these pressures for reform. And there's a number of new organizations, groups emerging. Michelle Rhee, who is the chancellor from Washington, D.C., is actually moving to Sacramento. She's opening the headquarters of this new organization called Students First. She's engaged to the mayor of Sacramento, Kevin Johnson, and this was just announced this past week. She has set a goal of raising $1 billion and signing up 1 million volunteers nationally. She's being a little coy about what exactly she's going to be doing in California, but obviously based in Sacramento, it's hard to imagine somebody with her profile.
It can be no coincidence that she chose, and not just to do with her fiance, Kevin Johnson, but California being the state, the trend-setting state. What kind of battle does this set up?
1 out of 8 school kids in the United States are in California. She is very pro-charter schools. She wants to abolish teacher tenure. She wants to change the way teachers are
not
evaluated.
Happy with her, although she's seen as a visionary by a lot of people. What kind of battle does this set up with these powerful teachers unions in Sacramento when you're at the time when it's potentially huge?
It's Jerry Brown, who likes to talk about reform a whole lot, but doesn't want to, anger the teachers union.
And Jerry Brown, very interesting. He appeared before the State Board of Education a couple of weeks ago when it met for the first time, and kind of bared his soul about what he thinks about education reform. And he expressed a lot of skepticism about these reform trends. He didn't address the specific issues, but he expressed some skepticism about the testing. He talked about inculcating character and having teachers forming close relationships to kids. I mean, things that the reformers don't talk about as much.
But Jerry Brown, as a candidate, also made sure to mention many times that he founded 2 charter schools in Oakland, that he saw that as one of the linchpins of his accomplishment.
He is not against charter schools, but he's not necessarily setting it as the central element of his platform.
Just tell us a little bit more about her plan. What exactly does she plan to do with this $1 billion when she raises it?
It's not, they just announced this in December. She has a lot of corporate support. Philanthropist Eli Broad from Los Angeles, one of the first people who said he would be supporting her, so she's going to be getting a lot of support from California. But it's very much ending teachers' tenure. Now, right now in California, once you've passed your probationary period of 2 years, it's not actually called tenure, but you have to be fired for cause. You can't just fire them. First 2 years you can do that. She wants to eliminate that. She also wants to give teachers pay based on merit or performance. She wants to include test scores of students as part of the evaluation process. And so all these are controversial issues, and the teachers union is not going to look too kindly on most of it.
I was going to say, California has a new superintendent of public education, Tom Torlakson, who was supported by the California Teachers Association. I mean, is he another player in this battle, that Carla has referred to about? I know he's not necessarily going to be in favor of a wholesale shift to charter schools.
Definitely a player, but I think what's very interesting how Jerry Brown has situated himself. He is in a very powerful and central position in terms of the education agenda in California. He eliminated the education secretary, which is traditionally part of his cabinet. He did go and meet with the State Board of Education. The head of the State Board is his previous president, Mike Kirst from Stanford. And so he has sent a signal that he is going to be directly involved.
Yeah, and we're out of time right here now, but there are other organizations in addition to the one that Ms. Reams wants to establish.
Yes, there's one very interesting new TLA, which is a dissident group within the United Teachers of LA, the very powerful teachers union, which Mayor Villaraigosa there said is against reform. Gloria Romero, the former state senator, has a group called Democrats for Education Reform. She wants to go up against the Democratic Party, which she says is in the pockets of the teachers union. So there are all these new forces that are emerging that we have to see how it plays out, but things are going to become very interesting.
Okay, that's the state revolving around money and reform. Scott, your story is about the U.S. Supreme Court, who wants to see some changes in the Ninth Circuit here in terms of their powers to make decision on parole.
It does, and there's also a budget implication for all that, which we'll get to later. But this is a case of the Supreme Court this week overturning two decisions that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal court of appeals in San Francisco, had issued last year. It had to do with a couple of cases of two inmates, one of whom was convicted a few years ago of attempted first-degree murder. He was given 11 years to life. Another was convicted in Los Angeles of murder, first-degree murder, and was given 7 years to life. And in both of their cases, in one case, the parole board denied their appeal to get out of prison, and then in the other case, the parole board said, yes, you should be paroled, you've changed and all those things, but the Governor Davis, rejected it and didn't allow him to get released. Both of those inmates appealed those decisions, one from the governor, one from the parole board, to the appeals court, the federal court. And after looking at it, the appeals court said, the state was unreasonable. These two guys should have gotten out of prison, and ordered the state to release them from prison. The state appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, you had no business really getting involved in this. And it was a real rebuke to the Ninth Circuit, which has a real tension-filled relationship with the U.S. Supreme Court. And in fact, one of the judges who was overturned this week had two other decisions overturned last week. So very, very contentious relationship.
So this whole issue of parole really applies to prison overcrowding, which is a huge issue, as we know, a financial issue here in California. How is this going to impact all this? How is it going to apply to prison overcrowding?
Well, in a couple of ways. One, there's another case that the Supreme Court has heard arguments about, and it has to do again with this Ninth Circuit and this same judge, Stephen Reinhardt, a very liberal judge, ordering the state to release up to 40,000 inmates from California, not dangerous criminals, but people who will not be a danger to society, in order to alleviate the overcrowding. So the U.S. Supreme Court may say again, as they have recently, no, you're wrong. The state does not have to release those folks. And that would have huge budgetary implications, because obviously the overcrowding in state prisons is just one of several reasons that the prison budget is $9 or $10 billion. So it certainly is going to have an effect there. One interesting thing is, we have a new governor, Jerry Brown, and it's going to be interesting to see, does he take a different tack? Does he have a different approach on parole? And
He's the former Attorney General.
Former Attorney General,
right.
Who appointed Rose Byrd many years ago, and then
exactly.
we became tough on crime. He's going to have 6 of the 12 parole board appointments to make in the coming 7 months. So it'll be interesting to see if he puts people on there maybe who have a different attitude about rehabilitation and parole, or if he does what his predecessors have always done, which is to take a real tough on crime approach.
Well, he has proposed a pretty significant shift in prison population to the local level, which maybe will come with enough money to pay for it. Probably not.
Yeah.
Does this affect that in any way?
Well, the Supreme Court decision doesn't, but in terms of the county jails, the local officials are saying, hey, we're overcrowded too, right. And so we don't really have room for these folks. But this is another issue, of course, but related. Jerry Brown's also going to have an appointment to the state Supreme Court. Carlos Moreno announcing that he's retiring. So we're in the coming weeks, we're going to get a sense of where Jerry Brown is going on the crime and punishment issue. And my guess is he's not going to want to appoint somebody or to any of those positions that's going to create a distraction from the real issue, which is the budget.
And he has to face the issue of what this means when you're talking about overcrowding to the state budget. So he has a budgetary problem as well as a philosophical one as to how he feels about parole.
And one of the interesting things is that in his budget, he's proposed a $400 million increase for the prison budget, which actually hasn't gotten that much attention. And then he also cut the rehabilitation budget by $150 million. We already cut $250 million under Arnold Schwarzenegger. What signal does that send to you?
Well, it would indicate that he's going to continue to be, as we've seen, tough on crime. But it could also be kind of a bargaining chip. Put that in the budget, knowing the Democrats are going to want to take that out. Mayors, executives always do that kind of thing, where they'll put something in, knowing that the budget is really a negotiation, and it's something that they expect will come out. And that could be, what it is, or it could be a real reflection of his philosophy. But given, all the other demands that California has for programs, I'm not sure. I'd be surprised if that's really a top priority.
What about the influence of the new Attorney General, who's a smart on crime, not tough on crime person?
Yes, so Kamala Harris has, one of the underlying fundamental problems in California is the recidivism rate. 70% of inmates who leave prison on parole go back for minor parole violations, a lot of them. And so I think one of the things Kamala Harris is going to do is look at how can we reduce that recidivism rate so that when people get out of prison, they stay out of prison, with job training and support in the community, those kinds of things, because that is a huge contributor.
And when he was mayor of Oakland, this is something he became acutely aware of, because all these people are coming back to his city.
That's right.
So that should shape the discussion.
It should. And, I think that you can find, it's one of those issues, I think, if you craft it properly, you can find support, on both sides of the aisle.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight to talk about two gentlemen, the president and the governor, who money would mean everything to if they had a little more of it. That's all the time that we have for tonight. Visit kqed.org/thisweek to catch up on complete episodes and segments. And then you can subscribe to our newsletter and our podcast and share your thoughts about the program. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.